Wait, she's not in the photo. My sister said it sweetly, calmly, like she was correcting a small mistake. I was still holding the bouquet I had spent 20 minutes arranging that morning. Only real family, please. Soft laughter moved through the crowd. I didn't move. I didn't laugh. I just stood there, holding flowers for a wedding I had spent 8 months building, and understood, finally and completely, that I was never going to be what she needed me to be. I was only ever going to be useful. That was the moment everything changed. My name is Amelia Brooks. I'm 34. I've spent most of my life being the quiet one, the fixer, the organizer, the sister who shows up early and leaves late and never asks for anything in return. I'm a freelance writer, remote work, online projects, nothing my family ever took seriously. My dad once told a relative I was between real jobs. My mom described it as typing things on the internet. They weren't being cruel exactly, they just genuinely didn't understand it, or me. Growing up, my younger sister was the one who got the applause, the one whose name you heard first at dinner. She was bright and social and beautiful, and she knew how to fill a room in a way I never could. I wasn't jealous of that, I was just honest about it. I was the backup plan, the reliable one, the daughter they noticed when something went wrong and forgot the moment it was fixed. I built my life around that role for a long time, quietly, without complaint, without asking for recognition. I thought that was just who I was. Then, my sister called me 8 months before her wedding and asked for help, and I said yes, because some part of me still believed that if I showed up fully enough, she would finally see me. If you've ever been the invisible one in your own family, the one who holds everything together while everyone else takes the credit, subscribe right now. I need you to hear this story. Drop your experience in the comments. And if you've ever swallowed your pain just to keep the peace, click hype. This one is for you. For 8 months, I was the wedding. Not officially, not in any way that would be acknowledged or thanked, but practically, yes. I was the one calling venues, comparing catering quotes, tracking RSVPs, and managing the spreadsheet no one else wanted to look at. When the original DJ canceled 14 days before the date, I found a replacement by midnight. When the centerpiece order came in wrong the week of the wedding, I drove across town at 7 a.m. and fixed it before anyone woke up. My sister's response to most of this was a breezy, "That's what sisters are for," said warmly, said without a second thought. On the wedding day itself, I arrived before anyone else. I helped set up, I ran last-minute errands, I was handed a checklist and a radio and treated, gently and without malice, like a member of the event staff, rather than the bride's sister. I told myself it didn't matter, that the day wasn't about me. Then came the photos. The photographer called immediate family forward for the formal group shot. I walked over naturally, stood beside my mother, and smiled. It felt right. It felt like where I was supposed to be. My sister turned, looked directly at me, and said, "Let's keep this one for real family, okay?" The room went quiet for a half second. Then came the soft, uncomfortable laughter, the kind that fills a silence no one wants to own. My parents stood on either side of her and said absolutely nothing. Not a glance, not a hand on my arm, nothing. Behind me, someone whispered, "Wasn't she the one who planned all of this?" My sister didn't flinch. She turned back toward the camera and smiled like nothing had happened. I stepped back. I held the gift I had brought, a custom piece I spent 3 weeks sourcing, and I stood very still. No tears, no trembling, just a cold, quiet stillness, and the beginning of something I hadn't felt before, clarity. Later that evening, during her speech, she thanked her husband's family, she thanked college friends, she thanked vendors by name, including the florists whose order I personally corrected. She looked around that room full of people who loved her, and she never once said my name. The reception confirmed what the photo had started. My seat was at a table near the back. Distant acquaintances, a co-worker of her husband's, 2 people I had never met. When I asked about it, my aunt relayed the message with a shrug. They ran out of seats at the main table. I nodded. I sat down. I unfolded my napkin. Then my mother appeared beside me. She leaned in close and said quietly and firmly, "Don't make a scene today, Amelia. It's her day." I hadn't done anything. I hadn't said a word to anyone, but I was already being managed. A cousin of the groom leaned over at one point and said cheerfully, "You're a real behind-the-scenes person, aren't you? Not really a spotlight type." He meant it kindly. It landed like a verdict. Across the room, my sister was radiant, laughing, dancing, completely at ease. At one point, she said to a group of friends, just loud enough to carry, "Everything turned out exactly how I wanted." She was right. It had, because I had made sure of it. Something closed in me around that moment, not with a slam, more like a lock turning. The hurt was still there, but something was sitting on top of it now, something steadier. I stopped feeling like a wounded person and started feeling like a witness. I put down my checklist, I stopped tracking the timeline, I sat still and I watched, and I finally let myself understand what I had been refusing to accept for years. This wasn't a bad day. This wasn't stress or poor planning or thoughtless timing. This was just who they were, what my family never knew. knew. What they had dismissed and mocked for years was what my writing had actually become. They thought I was blogging, hobbyist content, the kind of thing you do before you find a real career. My dad said it in front of relatives. My mom said it over the phone to her sister. My sister had never once asked me about it, not what I wrote, not who read it, not whether it was going well, so they had no idea. Years ago, I started an anonymous blog. No name, no photograph, no last name attached. I wrote about real life, family dynamics, emotional neglect, the specific loneliness of being surrounded by people who have already decided who you are. I wrote with precision and honesty, the way I had always wanted to speak but never been given the space to. That blog had grown into something they couldn't have imagined. Hundreds of thousands of readers, posts that had crossed into the millions, messages from people in different countries telling me that my words had given them language for things they had never been able to explain, that reading my stories had made them feel less alone in their own homes. I had a voice, a real one. They just weren't listening to it. What they also didn't know was that I had drafts, detailed, honest, carefully structured drafts of moments exactly like the one I had just lived. I had been documenting my life for years, not for revenge, but because I believed that truth, told clearly, was worth something. Sitting at that back table, I felt everything align. My friend Megan found me just after 9. We've known each other since we were 12. She had come as my guest, and she had spent the whole evening watching with quiet, careful eyes. She sat beside me, touched my arm, and said simply, "Why do you keep letting them do this?" I opened my mouth to deflect. I didn't. For the first time in longer than I could count, I told her everything. The 8 months of planning, the photo, the speech, the back table, my mother's quiet instruction, the smell of the floral arrangements I had personally approved, the sound of polite laughter after my sister's words, the weight of the gift box as I stepped away from that photograph. I left before it ended. No goodbye, no dramatic exit. I walked to my car, placed the gift carefully in the back seat. I was absolutely not leaving it there, and I drove home. That night, I sat at my desk and opened my laptop and wrote. 2 hours. No exaggeration, no embellishment, just the truth, in order with specific detail. The 8 months of work, the day, the photo, the speech, the back table, my mother's quiet instruction, the smell of the floral arrangements I had personally approved, the sound of polite laughter after my sister's words, the weight of the gift box as I stepped away from that photograph. I titled it Only Real Family. I published it just after midnight. By morning, 10,000 shares. By afternoon, over 100,000. By the following evening, people who had been in that room were finding the post, the details specific enough that guests from the wedding recognized exactly what they were reading. My phone started ringing before breakfast. Family members, one after another, voices tight and fast. Then my sister's message arrived. "Did you write this about me?" I looked at it for a moment. Then I typed back 4 words. "You already know the answer." She called twice. I let it ring. Her next message came fast. "You embarrassed me in front of everyone. You had no right." I replied once, calmly. "Finally, you did that yourself. I just told the truth." Then I put the phone face down and made coffee. The comments kept coming. Readers weren't gentle with my sister, but I hadn't asked them to be. I had simply told what happened, and people drew their own conclusions. My family tried to manage the situation, but there was nothing left to manage. The story was already out. The truth was already moving. There was no version they could offer that would reframe what had been documented clearly and honestly by the person who had lived it. In the weeks after, I made the decision I had been circling for years. I stopped reaching out. I stopped returning the calls. My mother said I was being dramatic. My sister said I had ruined something sacred. A relative sent a long message about forgiveness. I read each one. I responded to none of them. Megan checked in every few days. She didn't complicate it. She just said, "I'm here," and she meant it. My blog grew faster in those weeks than it had in the previous 2 years. New readers arrived daily. I started working on something longer, a real project I had been postponing for years because I kept telling myself the timing wasn't right. The timing was right now. I looked at my life, my quiet apartment, my work, my one genuinely loyal friend, my platform built on honesty, and I felt something unexpected. Peace. Real peace. Not performed, not forced. I had spent years trying to earn a seat at a table that was never truly set for me. I had planned the event, fixed the problems, carried the gift, and still been told I wasn't real family. But sitting at my own desk on an ordinary morning with good coffee, I understood something I should have understood sooner. I never needed their version of family. I needed my own definition of it. And I had been building that all along, quietly, in the only language I had ever truly trusted. My words, my truth, my story. If any part of this reached you, if you have ever shown up completely for people who treated you like background noise, you are not alone. I see you. Leave your story in the comments. Your voice matters more than the people who ignored it ever wanted you to believe. Subscribe, because this is a space where being honest is enough. And click hype to help this reach someone who needs it tonight. Your story has power. If you felt something listening to mine, subscribe and share what you're carrying in the comments. Every hype you give this video puts it in front of someone who's been waiting to feel less invisible. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening.